The affirmation today is, I sizzle with enthusiasm. Charles Fillmore wrote that, and he wrote, I sizzle with enthusiasm at the work that is yet to be done by me. He used to write that out and hand it to people after he made that statement. But I sizzle with enthusiasm. Let's say that 3 times. I sizzle with enthusiasm. I sizzle with enthusiasm. I sizzle with enthusiasm. The question is, how do I feel life? How do I feel life? Not how do I feel about life. How do I feel life? How do I feel it? Like touch it, feel it. How do you feel life? This past week I was talking with someone, and it happened to be a physician, but he was very interested in the kind of things that we teach and we talk about, because I had talked to him about it. And he was asking me, how do you get that? How do you get that? And I said, well, you get it by coming to understand it. And once you come to understand it, you understand how it operates and you let it happen. It's like we talk about substance, right? And this invisible substance out here that is all around us. And yet we think that we are limited in so many ways, and yet there's everything out there. How do you feel life? How do you feel it? How do you feel it within you? Charles Fillmore felt it at 90 plus, 92, I think he was 92 or 93, because he sizzled with enthusiasm in a 92-year-old body. Now, I'm sure the 92-year-old body had an infirmity or two. And yet, in the midst of that infirmity, he sizzled with enthusiasm because he had the ability to feel life. And in spirituality and in New Thought, a lot of times we lose that because we think that we're supposed to feel a certain way all the time. And we think that there's a way to do things spiritually that are better or worse, but you feel however you feel. And you feel because within you there is something there. There's something. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, someone once said that pain is a great thing because it reminds us that we're still alive, you know. And sometimes it takes pain for people to feel life. But it is that dynamic inside us. And so however you feel, you feel. And that's how you feel. But how do we feel life? And the question I want you to look at this week with yourself and in your own individual life is not how do you feel about life, how do you feel life? How do you feel life? Really have it there, touch it and feel it. It's like when we talk about prosperity, what do we talk about if we have a limit or lack in our resources? We talk about seeing prosperity, right? And feeling prosperous, right? If you're sick and you feel health, you begin to feel it. Not only feel it within you, but you've got a hold of it. You've got hold of that. And, you know, Myrtle Fillmore in her Healing Letters wrote so extensively and beautifully about laying hold of this feeling of health and this relationship with the presence and power of God, as Mary Baker Eddy in Christian Science said, despite appearances to the contrary. If we understand the teaching, which is not complex at all, it isn't something that we're trying to learn or something that we're trying to attain. It isn't something that we have to go out and acquire. It is something that everyone has, and it has nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with spirituality, and it is universal. And that's why these truths are so dynamic and so important. And so how do you feel? How do we feel about, not about, but how do we feel life? How do you actually feel it and feel it within you? But what do we know from a spiritual standpoint? We know that the true self, the true us, is there, vibrant energy in this process of life. You know, and so often this issue of death comes up. Why do you suppose it comes up so often? Because we all do it. And it's part of the divine process. And it's also part of the process of understanding the continuation of life. I've done hundreds of funerals in my life, and one of the things that I always think because there's always lots of quiet time at funerals, even for the person presiding. I like to do funerals because it's such a wonderful opportunity to remind people about life, and also remind people about how they feel about life and how they feel about death. And there's an old Baptist, saying or joke. I guess it's a joke. It's not really, but it's when the minister asked everybody to, how many of you want to go to heaven? Put up your hand. And put up your hand. Everybody put up your hand. You want to go to heaven? Everyone. All right. How many want to go today? See, nobody wants to go today. What's the problem? It's like something that shouldn't happen. I'm sorry, we miss your mom, your dad, whoever. You miss all these people. But, I sit there through these hundreds of services, and the one thing that I want people to leave believing is that life goes on. And I just am so taken by the fact that the room is filled with religious people of all kinds of faiths who believe in eternal life, who believe all of this intellectually, but then when it comes to the casket and it comes to the illness and it comes to that, well, maybe not for me, So it is how we feel life. You see, and life is, and it is constant, and it is changing, but it is there. And if we can lay hold of this aspect of feeling life as it is in the present moment, however it is, whether it's somebody with a horrible disease, or whether it's somebody with happiness and joy, whether we're having a baby or whether we're doing a funeral, whatever it is, that life is in the midst. It is like the presence and power of God. People say so often, where's God in the midst of all of these problems and trouble? God's right there. God's right there. And so in the midst of that, in the midst of all of it, we have the ability to draw upon the resource, which is the laws that we understand that operate, and the laws that operate, and the laws of life that operate, remind us again and again the very simple statement that we make about thoughts. Thoughts in mind create after their kind. If you see somebody and they've died, and you think they've died, then that's how you feel. That's what's happening in you. If you see a checkbook and it's empty, and you believe you're poor, and you go with that thought, you feel that. We're feeling constantly. And so how we feel at any given moment, and it isn't, again, the process of denying how we feel. We feel the way we feel. But when we feel the way we feel, we have an opportunity to get in touch with the reality and the truth. And the reality and the truth is that we are vibrantly alive, that there are limitless possibilities, that there is something yet to be done. As Charles understood so well at 90 plus, he sizzled with enthusiasm. What did he sizzle with enthusiasm for? At the work that is yet to be done by me. Now for him, the work was everything, because his life was telling people about the teaching. Whatever it is for you, whatever it is for any of us, it might be different, but to get into that understanding of feel of life and knowing it. The affirmation we used this morning is, I sizzle with enthusiasm. We say that 3 times. I sizzle with enthusiasm. I sizzle with enthusiasm. I sizzle with enthusiasm. The question is, how do I feel life? And we can take that affirmation, I sizzle with enthusiasm, and we can just change it and say, I sizzle with life. And if I sizzle with life, then I sizzle with enthusiasm. Because you know what that means? That means that life is here, and no matter what happens, it continues on in a powerful and dynamic way. So now I can do all things. I can deal with all things. I can endure all things. All of that goes away because we get into the reality and truth to feel life. The good news is that every one of us was created and designed to sizzle with enthusiasm. The good news is that every single one of us is alive. The good news is that every single one of us is going to die, Not only a physical death, but in 100 ways before. And the good news is that in our dying, we will realize fully and completely that we are alive. But isn't it sad to give up 40 or 60 or 80 or 100 years of sizzling to learn that lesson after the lid is closed? Because if we could sizzle with enthusiasm, if we could sizzle with life and allow that life to bubble forth in all of its forms, we'd be able to deal with everything that comes to us, regardless of how difficult or burdensome, and we would be able to do it with the understanding and realization of who and what we truly are. And that's really what this faith is all about. That is the simple truth, that we are created in the likeness and image of God. We are created in the likeness and image of God, and we're imbued by our Creator with those powers and graces that He gave to all of His children, and that is to be like Him. And so with that presence and that power, we have this magnificent ability to feel life, to be alive, to sizzle, and to have enthusiasm. So this week, I invite you to go out and take that question and ask yourself how you feel life, how you feel it. If Charles were here, Charles Fillmore were here today, he would say, as he said then, I'm sure, he bubbled with life, always. And he bubbled with it whether he was 92 or whether he was 45. And it took him a long time to understand that, but he came to that understanding. So go out and sizzle and bubble and do something magnificent this week.